I guess I will start by have a quick introduction of myself. So, my name is Sabrina Feng. My day job is the group head of technology, cyber, and resilience risk at the London Stock Exchange Group. In my spare time, I have been working with ISO BSI quite a bit. And in the last 5 years, I become the editor for ISO IEC 27002, the Code of Practice for Information Security Controls. So I'm here today really to talk about the standard. I assume if you're joining this session, you would know something about ISO 27002, and I assume you're in the cybersecurity or information security industry. So, my focus today, I want to talk to you about the change, rather than to talk about the whole standard from the very beginning. So, okay, so let me just try again to share my screen. It looks like you are able to see my screen. I just need to make sure I'm sharing the right page. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, I can see your screen here. It all seems to work.
I now see your chat, so I need to. How can I see your chat? Okay, so you can see my screen share. In that case, I'm just gonna, so I won't look at the chat and I will just show the screen. Because I'm not, so. Right, so apologies for this. I wasn't able to join the technical briefing session, but I apologize. But I hope you can see my screen. So I can't see your chat now, so I will take the questions at the end. So I want to, I think in order, before I get into the detail of the standard, I want to take you through the journey, the journey of revising the standard. So I hope, in the next 30 minutes to give you an overview of the change of the standard as well. I mean, as an editor, I'm really pleased with what we have achieved with the revision project. I really believe, the third edition of 27002 is a modernized, simplified, and a versatile new edition. So the revision started from the study period in October 2016 at Abu Dhabi, and I become the rapporteur of the study period, together with the Swiss expert Peter Weiss and the Swedish expert Jan Brendel, where we asked for contribution towards producing a design specification and the outline document, including document structure, title, and the scope. Then at the second meeting and at Hamilton, where the current document structure starting to emerge, and at Berlin in October 2017, we had the final design specification, the outline document, together with a new work item proposal to start the actual revision project. So this is where we have settled the structure as you see today. So, it's a very new structure of 27002, and it really was at the Berlin meeting. That's where we settled on this new structure as you see it today. Then at Wuhan in April 2018, the French expert Alia Forati and the Argentine expert Veronica Marinelli joined me as the editors, and we produced the first working draft of the document. And then at UVic, the second working draft, Tel Aviv, the third one, and following by Paris, our first committee draft. And then little did we know, it was the last time we met physically in person for a very long time, but the work continues. So we had 3 more meetings on Zoom, produced the second committee draft, the DIS, the FDIS. We had some of our most productive meetings and resolved thousands of documents and comments through Zoom. It has especially worked well for me personally, as I was able to chair the meetings at the comfort of my home when I was 6 months pregnant, and later on when my baby was 3 months old. It has been a tremendous 5 years. We had 10 working meetings, produced 2 working drafts, 2 committee drafts, resolved over 10,000 comments from roughly 200 experts from more than 30 national bodies, and experts from Working Group 1, Working Group 4, SC7, IEEE, and industry bodies like ISF, ISACA, and many others. And the knowledge, the experience, and expertise from all of these experts from different industries, countries, trade bodies, academic, is what I'm so confident to say that, the new edition of 27001 is a better edition. It's modernized, it's simplified, and it's versatile. So now let's take a look at the new edition, what has changed. So first of all, I want to talk about the title and the scope. We moved away from the term code of practice and what it implies as a title. So the new standard is just information security controls without the code of practice. Essentially, it is a set of common controls can be used either standalone for implementing controls based on international recognized best practice, or use it in conjunction in the context of ISO IEC 27001, the Information Security Management System. And lastly, it's for developing organizational information security management guidelines. So this is the new title and the scope for the 3rd edition of the standard. The main change of the standard is around its controls. So I will talk about the controls in a bit more detail. So the key control of the key changes of the standard on the controls in the new edition, there are 93 controls are organized in 4 clauses compared to the 2nd edition, where there were 114 controls organized in 14 clauses in 35 categories. So in the previous revisions of this standard, I mean, as you know, it's a very, very popular standard. It's very widely used in the industry. In all the previous revisions, lots of time was spent to debate around these clauses and categories, how they were organized. But they were used by the users. Users may have been coming from different context, different industry, and they may use these categories very differently. So what we decided, and it's quite fundamental changes of the structure, is we said, well, let's just put the standard into 4 category themes. We call them themes. So there are organizational controls, people controls, physical controls, and technological controls. So the 93 controls are organized in the 4 categories. The 93 controls, including 11 new controls, 24 merged controls, and 58 updated controls. So we'll take a look at this in a bit more detail later on. So determining the controls is one of the most difficult discussions during the revision. Some with very robust debate and challenge. We have managed to reach consensus with the new set of controls in those 4 clauses, as you see them on the screen. Just to share a few key considerations. So firstly, we found that the second edition has very heavy focus on preventative controls, but very light on detective and reactive controls. So we intended to have a good balance of preventative, detective, and reactive controls in the new edition. Secondly, it is important to emphasize that information security is not just a technical topic, but covering organization, people, and physical controls too. So as you can see, there are a large number of organizational controls in the new edition. Thirdly, we found that there were many controls in the second edition that are closely related and one cannot operate with the other. So we aim to merge these controls. And the new controls ranging from threat intelligence, cloud security, to data leakage management bring the standard to cover the more state-of-the-art measures managing information security risks. The 24 merged controls, where we find the opportunity to simplify the standard, combine multiple related activities into one single control, makes it easier for users of the standard. And the 58 updated controls, where expert provided input to bring the control up to date and remove some reference to obsolete technologies. So that's a summary of the controls. So let's take a look at within the control, what has changed. So in the control structure, there are 2 main changes of the control structure. So firstly, we introduced a new concept called attribute. Each control is associated with 5 attributes: control types, information security properties, cyber security concepts, and organizational capabilities and security domains. So the purpose of these attributes is to allow the controls to be filtered, sorted, and organized for different audiences and purpose. The result of such filter are referred as views. So however, these attributes and their views are only examples. Organizations may disregard one or more of them and create their own attribute. And I will spend more time later on attribute. But this introduction of attributes really helping us to organize the controls in a way that's more useful for the users. The second change is the use of purpose for each control instead of objective for a group of control. So each control now will have a purpose statement rather than a group of controls meeting a particular objective. So this simplifies the standard and gives the user more flexibility on determining the controls that is relevant to the organization. So here is the detail of updated controls. So I won't go into the details, but as you can see, all the controls has been updated, and we considered a lot of modern concept. When I say modern, it's so modern anymore, but compared to the older version of the standard, it wasn't in the previous edition of the standard. So here's a list of the merged controls. Again, I won't go into the details. These are all in the appendix, annex of the standard. And as I said earlier, the objective is to make it easier for the users and to simplify the controls. And here's other new addition controls. Again, I won't go into the detail. I mean, you can spend time, read the standard, but as you can see, there are key controls where we talk about this a lot, but it wasn't in the standard before, such as threat intelligence, security for cloud, and data leakage, etc. So now I'm going to talk about attributes a little bit so that you can understand our consideration here. So as I mentioned earlier, these attributes are different categorizations of controls from the themes to present different views of the controls. So I want to emphasize the use of attributes is not mandatory, and organizations and industry bodies can create new attributes that are specific to the organization or the industry body. So, let's take a look at some examples here. So for example, each control in the new version has these 5 attributes. So control types are information security properties. With the introduction of various cybersecurity frameworks in the industry, we introduced the cybersecurity concept attribute, which is aligned to NIST and ISO 27101 cybersecurity framework. And the operational capability is a very similar view to the second edition clauses, where we say that the 15 common operational capabilities in information security management. And the last one on security domain, is aligned to the ENISA framework on minimum security measures for operators of essential services. So these are just examples of those categories, and organizations and industry bodies can create their own using this concept. So how can you use this? So for example, you could run a quick example. So here's a very simple view that an organization to use a spreadsheet, a database, or a web-based technology to facilitate this. But for illustration, you can just use a simple spreadsheet to filter the controls and looking for the controls meeting a particular requirements you're looking for. So here, you can think about build a tool, and I know many industry bodies are starting to use this method and starting to build this attribute for the whole, for the organizations within the industry to use a consistent way and method to filter controls and use controls. And then you can have new attribute. So, for example, you can create a GDPR attribute where you can create value around if a control is relevant to GDPR requirements or to a data privacy requirements. Or you can even add filters around different regulations. And again, we encourage industry bodies to do a lot of this work so that organizations can just leverage a common language created by the industry and use for their own purposes. I think we're running out of time, so very quickly I'll talk about a few other changes. So we have included up-to-date term of reference in the standard so that users do not have to go to a different standard like 27,000 to look for the meaning of the terms. And we have updated these terms so the standard can be accurately understood by all the users. We introduced a subheading in some controls guidance text where it is very long and can be structured. So here on the high right-hand side of the example control, you can see how the sub-heading is used. And finally, there are two new annexes. So Annex A explains how an organization can use the control attribute concept and define its own attribute. And Annex B represents the correspondence between the controls in this edition and the previous edition of the standard. So finally, just to quickly summarize, I hope it's a quick introduction to the new standard. We believe it's a modernized standard with the new controls and the up-to-date guidance. It's a simplified standard with less complex structure, with less number of controls. It's more versatile with the introduction of attribute. So I hope that's that's helpful. Thanks everyone for joining. I mean, yeah, so thanks